All right, welcome everyone. My name is Deanna Gerber, and I'm the coordinator of recruitment here at the College of Veterinary Medicine. A few housekeeping things before we get going, and I'll have Kathy introduce herself after kind of the housekeeping stuff. This webinar is being recorded and will be up on our YouTube channel. So that's youtube.com/Iowa State University College of Veterinary Medicine, or if you search on YouTube for us, you'll find us. So it will be up there. So if you can't make, if you can't sit here for 3 hours, or if you have other things to do, please know that it will be recorded for you to watch or even review later. A copy of the slide deck is available on the link that I just put in the chat. And so if there's information that you want, if you want to go back and reference screenshots, whoa, that was not supposed to happen, or anything else like that, that is available there at that link as well. And I'll post that a few times throughout the webinar, just so folks who may be hopping on and hopping off have that information. So I'll post that that link once again in the chat there. So I think we've got a good number of folks on. We'll, kind of welcome folks as they come on as well. But we will kind of go ahead and get started. So like I said, my name is Deanna Gerber, and I'm the coordinator of recruitment here at the College of Veterinary Medicine, which means that I work with pre-veterinary students as they prepare for and kind of begin going through the application process. And then I'll ask Kathy to introduce herself as well.
I'm Kathy Keel. I'm the coordinator of admissions, and basically I start to take over when Deanna leaves off. I help people through the application process and make sure everybody gets reviewed and answer any questions you might have about the process itself.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Speaking of questions, there is a Q&A box that you'll find in your Zoom toolbar. What we'll do is we'll use that for any questions that you have. Some of the nice things about that Q&A box versus the text or versus the chat box, the Q&A box allows you to upvote a question that you want to know the answer to as well. So, you can utilize that function. If you see somebody who also has your same question, please upvote that. If you have a question, you might glance through that Q&A box to see if other folks have already asked that question, and then you can, kind of help bump that towards the top. So we will we'll filter by the most upvotes, hoping that we can get through all of the questions that we have today. This is really about your questions that you have about the application process. We have a bunch of information that we will give you, but ultimately we want to make sure that your questions are answered. The questions that you submitted through the registration page were, if you were able to do that, I think everybody was, are incorporated in our slide deck already. So you're welcome to post those in the Q&A box again, but please know that they have been noted, and we'll do our very best to get to them. Okay, so we're covering a lot. There will be a lot of kind of general VMCAS information and things that, maybe you've heard from other veterinary schools as well. So there are some general things that we'll cover, but it's really good to keep in mind that Kathy and I, of course, are very familiar with the Iowa State admissions process. So that's what we're going to be talking about today. Essentially, if I would say everything we have should have a little note at the bottom that says, please, consult other veterinary schools that you're working with as well. So if you're applying to multiple veterinary schools, and in fact, most students, I think now we're up to about the average is 5 veterinary schools that students apply to. You want to check with every single one of those schools so that what their requirements are as well. So today's presentation is, yes, a little bit about the ins and outs of the application and, you know, things to think about, but they're mostly in the, you know, realm of Iowa State. Great question. Can you enable closed captioning? I will attempt. Yes. Kathy, do you want to talk a little bit about how this applies to UNL, the University of Nebraska 2+2 program?
This year, we have a separate checkoff for the UNL PPVM program. If anybody is Nebraskan watching, it's now separate. And if you want to apply to Iowa State as well, you're welcome to do so. But I just like people to know that there are that will cost you another VMCAS fee for that. So now you the UNL PPVM program is under Iowa State University, but they are considered from VMCAS's angle as two separate programs. You can apply to one or the other or both, but they are considered two separate programs. I also strongly encourage Nebraskans to reach out to Nebraska when you have questions. Pretty much our application process is the same, but not quite. So if you are planning on applying to the UNL PPVM program, please, if you have questions, check with them just to make sure that you have the correct information for them. Okay.
Thank you, Kathy. Thank you. Okay. So I had my microphone on mute.
Okay.
Okay, I'm going to put the PPVM email address in the chat in case any of you need it for reference if you're a Nebraska resident planning to apply. Okay, so here is our agenda for the day. You'll see we're going to go through admissions process. So essentially, what we're looking for, how we evaluate the application, all of that. So that's that general admissions process. Then we'll take a break, we'll reset, and we'll talk about application details. So we'll talk about VMCAS and the Iowa State supplemental application. There will probably be time for a general kind of wrap-up questions at the end, although Kathy and I are pretty informal. So I would say if you do have a question on the topic that we're covering, please go ahead and put that in the Q&A box, because we want to make sure that we're getting to those questions kind of while we're still on the topic. If you think about a question later on, we'll get to that too. So please utilize that Q&A box there. A good thing to note is that while we're going to talk a lot about, things that you can do or things that, we are kind of looking for, there is no specific formula to being admitted to our veterinary school, or really any other veterinary school too. I think students sometimes feel a lot of pressure to be the perfect pre-vet student, and really the perfect pre-vet student looks differently for every single student. So I think that that's good to keep in mind, is that just because your journey to veterinary school looks different than someone else's journey, that's okay. And in fact, what I would argue is that no two people's journey through veterinary school and through their veterinary career is going to look the same either. So we want that variety, we want that diversity in our students' pathways to vet school. Okay, the two most popular questions that we get are, how do I make myself stand out how do I make my application stand out, and how can I improve my chances of getting in? So that is essentially how we built the next, the next bunch of slides that talk about our admissions process, with these two things in mind. How does my application stand out? How do I improve those chances of getting in? So just in general, and I would probably argue that these are fairly applicable to any veterinary school that you're going to apply to. You want to read all directions and all instructions thoroughly. So that means within the application, in any website that you can find kind of admissions, or from the schools that you can find any admissions, protocols or prerequisites or requirements that way. Proofread your application, your essays, all of that. You'll hear that a lot today. Have somebody else proofread your essays too. That's totally fine to ask for help from the writing center or from, your friend who maybe is a, English major or a communications major or something like that, right? So have somebody else proofread. Be concise and be realistic. Most of what you find on VMCAS has a character count, and you are going to have to kind of make sure that you're choosing your words and make sure that you're maybe even choosing your characters wisely. And then be realistic. We're talking about things like, one, be genuine on what, you actually did or didn't do on those, different experiences. Be realistic with experience hours. Be realistic about your career goals, those sorts of things. So you want to kind of be level-headed throughout. I'm going to pause because there is a question in the chat, and it's a really, really good one. So Kathy and I think sometimes take for granted that we know all of the acronyms in the veterinary, that have to do with veterinary school. And so before we move on, you're right. I did not kind of spell out that acronym. So VMCAS is the Veterinary Medical College Application Service. Yes. Okay, there we go. I got a nod from Kathy. So the Veterinary Medicine College Application Service. So essentially, that is the national application that is run by the American Association of Veterinary Medical Colleges. So AAVMC, you'll hear that sometimes. That a number of accredited veterinary schools participate in. So you will fill out one application. You will decide that those you want that application seen by, this whatever list you choose of 1 to 32 vet schools. And then we will have access to that once you've said, once you've submitted your application and said, yes, I want Iowa State to, I want to apply to Iowa State. We'll have access to that. So it's a national application service essentially. So great question. Thank you for that.
The one thing is, I don't know if there's anybody from Texas on here, but Texas does not use this. They have their own veterinary medical application service within the state of Texas. I don't know if they use this for non-resident students, but I know that Texas residents have their own application service to go through.
Perfect. Thank you, Kathy. Yes, not all veterinary schools use VMCAS, even if they are accredited, but yeah. Okay, great. Thank you. Okay, so that kind of brings us to communication. So communicate with VMCAS, so that Veterinary Medical College Medicine College Application Service. If you have questions about their application, that VMCAS info at vimcas.org, that email address is a great way to get your questions answered. I was working with a student yesterday, and they were, they were having some troubleshooting sort of things with VMCAS. So they hopped on, there's a live chat, and we got that question answered within, 3 minutes, I think. So it is really helpful to either email them or hop on that live chat. If you have VMCAS specific VMCAS specific questions. Communicate with Iowa State College, University College of Veterinary Medicine. So if you have technical questions on the supplemental application, or you kind of want to know a little bit more about how we process applications, you can kind of talk with us, as well as general information about our school, our admissions process, those sorts of things. So be in communication with us. If you have questions, there is no question too big or too small. We'll talk about where you put those questions and everything later. Communicate with your evaluator. So we'll talk about letters of recommendation. It is your job to make sure those people submit their letter of recommendation, right? And they kind of know what they're doing. So we'll make sure that you know what you're doing as well. And then communicate with the institutions that you are waiting on transcripts for. So we'll talk about how you submit transcripts, but you want to make sure that you're communicating with them. You'll obviously want to double check that you've put everything in that you need to, that you're required to for the application. Every single year we get incomplete applications that are submitted. And then definitely be sure that you're, checking your email very regularly to make sure you're not missing any correspondence from VMCAS and Iowa State. We'll also tell you about a couple other ways that VMCAS and Iowa State will communicate with you, so that you're getting all of that. So another good, there are questions rolling in, which is awesome. Thank you for that. So the first one I'm going to answer right now, and then the other two, we've got sections coming up on that. So I'm going to make sure that we answer those questions in those sections. So, this question says, so you can fill out one application and send it to multiple of vet schools through VMCAS. Exactly. That's what VMCAS is all about. Is, I kind of think about it as, the GRE or SAT, ACT, if you have taken, a standardized test like that, you'll take the test once, or, maybe multiple times if you're looking for a better score. But you're going to take that test essentially once and send your results to different schools. This is the same thing, sort of. You're going to fill out one VMCAS application and indicate which schools you want that application electronically sent to, essentially. So great clarification there. Thank you. All right. Anything I missed, Kathy, on the?
Nope. I think we've got it all coming up in the more specific areas.
Yes. Perfect. Sounds good. Okay. And then, so this is just a little bit about when we are saying, kind of what type of student we're looking for. This is what we're looking for. So someone who shows, and I would almost say we need to edit this to say, shows a mature understanding of the veterinary profession. That is hugely important. And you'll do that through essays and all of that kind of stuff. Demonstrates well-roundedness. We'll talk a lot about this when we talk about experiences and letters of recommendation and things like that. But we understand that you are a whole person. You are not just a student who's going to be a veterinarian someday. You're probably a student who enjoys a whole host of things and is involved in a whole host of things. So we want you to be able to communicate that with us. We like to see a student who gives back to their community and hones leadership skills in some way. In a lot of instances, these sorts of things that you'll let us know about are what help students stand out, what help students who maybe have, like an average score, maybe have slightly above average. So those things, if you have access to that, are great, great question, or are great kind of things to highlight, even if they have nothing to do with veterinary medicine. And then recognizes the importance of lifelong learning. The the reality of this profession, and I'm sure that you've talked with your, advisors and folks that you've been shadowing with, all of that, is that veterinarians never stop learning. Veterinarians never know it all. And so having that value of lifelong learning is a good thing, definitely. So great. Okay, so what's going to happen? You're going to hit submit on your application. So your VMCAS, so that national or that general application is submitted and paid for. Many veterinary schools have a supplemental application, which is true for Iowa State. We require a supplemental application that will be filled out. We'll kind of go into detail in that in just a little bit. We have a signature page, so a page that you say, yes, all of this information is correct, and you're going to electronically sign it or print it and send it in. And your supplemental application fee is also paid. Whether that's, electronically by credit card or sent in with your printed signature page, it's sent in by check, essentially. So then VMCAS, after you hit submit on your application, VMCAS is going to begin professional transcript entry if you have selected that process versus entering your own educational information. That is an extra fee, and we'll talk about that too in a little bit. So they'll start that. If professional transcript entry is not requested, then they are going to start the verification process. So once all of your transcripts have been received, they are going to essentially see what you enter in as far as your coursework goes and what they see on the transcript, and make sure that those match exactly. Again, we'll kind of go into detail. This is just kind of broad overview of what happens. So then Iowa State looks at those applications once VMCAS says, yes, everything, the transcripts look good. Everything has been kind of submitted. Yeah. Okay. So Kathy, I don't know if you want to kind of talk broad strokes about this, and then I'll make sure that we're catching those questions in the Q&A box.
Okay, no, that sounds good. I didn't know whether you wanted to wait because a lot of them apply to later sections of the conversation.
Yep.
Okay. Iowa State currently has, if you consider 100 points for your application evaluation, the academic review, and that's basically your 2 GPAs, the Prerequisite Science Gpa and the last 45 GPA, which is equal to 45% or 45 points of the evaluation. The Prerequisite Science Gpa is Iowa State's prerequisite science courses. It doesn't include any other science courses. So if what you put down, what you believe are your, if you want to calculate it yourself, what you believe are your courses that meet those science prerequisites, that's the way you can calculate it. I'm also happy to do that if people want to email me, because sometimes what you think fulfills a requirement doesn't necessarily fulfill the requirement. The last 45 is exactly that, the last 45 credits that you've taken, but we do not split terms. So if you might have 52 credits in the last 45, because we won't pick and choose out of one term which courses we're going to use to calculate that GPA. So it's the lowest amount you can have is 45, and then whatever constitutes the end of a term, so you may have over 45 in your last 45 GPA calculation. The committee review is 45%, and then the Casper test is another 10%. So that's how we calculate your committee scores. And again, we do not require the GRE, and we will not use it. I mean, people are always welcome to send it, but it will not be reviewed at all since it is not one of our criteria for evaluation. Deanna, you want to get to the, I don't know what the next slide is.
Yeah, that's perfect. So the next slide, so we're going to kind of break each section, each one of those sections down by yeah, just a little bit further into more detail. So do you want to keep
Yeah,
rolling, Kathy?
I'll continue. I just can't control the slide slideshow. Anyway, as we said, the academic review is 45%. We do use the cumulative GPA, the cumulative undergraduate GPA, only to make sure you're eligible to apply. Written in Iowa code for some reason, I have no idea why, you have to have a 2.5 cumulative undergraduate GPA in order to apply to the College of Veterinary Medicine. Most everybody has that. It's not a big thing. Once we see you've met that, you're 2.5 or above with your cumulative undergraduate, we don't look at it ever again. Then, as I said, we calculate the required science course GPA. Again, those are our required science courses. The GPA, the committee determines the GPA cutoff each year for the required science course. So for last year, and I believe probably this year, but it hasn't been determined yet, a 2.80 for the required science GPA was the cutoff. If you got below a 2.80, you were not sent to committee review. So I like people to know that, so you know where you stand. Again, I'm very happy to do a preliminary review for your required science course GPA. So you can email me with that information, but a 2.8, and I believe it'll probably be 2.8 again this year, providing we have a similar number of applications. And again, the last 45 credit, as I spoke about before, it may be more than 45 credits because we don't pick and choose courses from a term to equal 45 credits. We just go through the entire term.
Thanks, Kathy. So we've got quite a few questions concerning kind of GPA and prerequisites. So if it's okay, can I shoot some of those at you?
Please do.
So can you answer our points for GPA? So the 45%, are those assigned by kind of how high the GPA is then?
Yes, it's based on it's based on a 4.0 scale. So that's the way we do it. So basically, if you had a 4.0 in both the required sciences and the last 45, you would get a total of 45 points for that. So it's based on what your actual 4.0 scale GPA is.
Great, thank you. Okay, so another question is, if you retake a class, do you look at the highest grade of that class?
We do not use the highest grade. We use the last grade. So if you repeat a course, we will use the second grade you received. The first grade is not used. It's disregarded. The reason we use the last grade is when the committee discussed this was the fact that if you are bothering to repeat a course, they feel you should at least get the same grade, but hopefully a better grade when you repeat the course. So that is why the last grade is used. So the one thing that I see happen is that people will say, oh, I got a C, which fulfills the requirement. I've got a C, but I want to see if I can get a higher score. So they go in and they start taking the class and say, you know, I'm sick of going through organic chemistry 1 again, so I'm just not going to worry about it. But they don't withdraw from the class. Then you get an F in the class, and that's what's on your transcript. We consider that as the C fulfilled the requirement, but the grade we're using in your GPA calculation is going to be the last grade. So if you decide you don't want to, you know, you're really not into repeating this, or you're doing poorly, please withdraw from the course. We do not look at withdrawals, and so that is not going to hurt you in any way. But if you get an F in the course just because you decided you weren't interested in really pursuing it anymore, we will use that F. So again, if you repeat a course, we use the last grade, not the best grade. So if you feel you're not going to do as well or better than you did the first time around, please withdraw. That will prevent you from having a poorer grade used in your GPA calculation.
Great, thank you, Kathy. So this next question is regarding prerequisites. I took 2 semesters of physiology, so not a sequence, one undergraduate and one graduate level, to fulfill the anatomy and physiology requirement. Can I use my anatomy course to fulfill the electives requirement? So if somebody I think, you know, this is a good question, but it leads to a more general question, which is, if someone has 3 courses or 2 courses that each would fulfill the prerequisite, what course do you use?
Okay. We try to use, if you have multiple courses that fulfill the same prerequisite, we try to use the one with the best grade. When, and we'll get into more about the supplemental, but on the status page, your status page of the supplemental, we put your calculated GPAs in there. We do that so that you can look, and if you feel there's a problem, you can notify us. Last year, we had just about 2,000 applications. There's 3 of us that review academically those applications. Errors do occur. I believe we do a very good job, but when you're dealing with that many applications, errors occur. We make sure that the GPAs are posted so you can review them. We never feel bad about somebody saying, this doesn't sound right to me. What are you doing? How did you calculate this? That we can either explain to you how we did calculate it, or we can make a correction if there is an error. So we try to always use the best grade if you have multiple courses that fulfill a requirement. However, as we go through, if there's an error, you need to alert us to that, and we will recalculate it and tell you how we calculated the GPA.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, thank you. So can we talk, and I'm trying to figure out if this is better in our transcripts section or this section, but I think we'll just tackle it here. We've got a couple of questions regarding kind of how planned and in progress courses work. So are they evaluated? You know, when we look at that last 45 credits or even the required science GPA, how are planned and in progress courses factored into that?
Okay. Planned courses, and we need to know if you have an in progress course, like what you're taking when you submit your application, what your fall course schedule looks like, and what your spring course schedule looks like. Of course, we are not going to calculate anything for them because you haven't taken it yet. But we need to know that you are taking them, or you will get questions from us. So you do need to put those in so that we know that you have planned to take all these courses. I saw the one with a spring class schedule. The only thing we need to know, and I don't know how other schools handle this, we would just say you could put one course down if you're planning on taking biochemistry in spring 23. We would need to know that because that's one of our requirements. If you haven't figured out what the rest of your schedule looks like, it doesn't matter. You can put biochemistry down, one course down for a planned spring 23 course. And again, until we get the GPAs, we recalculate the GPAs with fall grades. So we have fall grades are due, I believe, January 20th this year. If it's on a weekend, it'll be the next day. But anyway, we will then take those and recalculate your GPAs before final decisions are made. So fall grades are included in the final decisions, but of course, spring grades are not. What was the other question?
The next question is, and I love these questions coming in because I think that they have some kind of general applications as well. So question is regarding general biology requirement. Can I use a semester 1 of Gen Bio with lab and cell biology? I had a higher grade in cell biology than general biology 2. So how does it work to kind of sub in coursework?
Okay. The first thing we look at for that is we will take the general biology 1 and 2 rather, prior to taking anything else. If you have a general biology 1 and 2 series, we will use that. If you don't have a biology 1 and 2 series and have maybe taken just one of those, that's when we start looking for substitutions. But we have to look and see, because schools vary tremendously on what they include in general biology 1 and what they include in general biology 2. We will look at the course descriptions for your general biology 1 or 2 course and determine whether that fits under the organismal or the cellular portion. Then once we determine what you have taken, we will look for either an organismal or cellular. So you can't take, in many cases, biology 1 is a cellular based course. So we would not accept biology 1 when the description says it's more cellular based and a cellular course. We would take general biology 1 in an organismal course. But the first priority is if you have a general biology 1 and 2 sequence, we will use that because that is our specific requirement.
Awesome. Thank you. Thanks, Kathy. Okay, so
I know that's a little confusing.
What?
I know that's a little confusing for people.
No, I think that helps clarify though. So I believe we have well, actually there's one question in the chat, and I'll that's totally fine. I've got it here. But I will remind folks that if you use the Q&A function, then you can get those questions filtered through. That's what I'm kind of pulling general Q&A questions from. So we've got a question in the chat, but I also wanted to kind of note that I put in the chat, somebody had asked about a list of prerequisites. So in general, if you go to applytovetschool.org, I put that link in the chat, or that website in the chat. That is a great place to find which vet schools you're applying to and which prerequisites they have. If you're looking for Iowa State specific information, you can go to vetmed.iastate.edu/future DVM students. You see that in the chat as well. There is an apply tab that has a bunch of information there, including links to like our supplemental application and all of that. So good resources for folks that are, want to make sure that they've got all of those prerequisites or any other requirements. Okay, so this question says, I have a class grade that is a prerequisite of vet school, and I'm transferring to Iowa State for undergrad. Okay, so can you talk a little bit about transfer credits? It seems like, it's not transferring in maybe as a specific class to their new university. It's, or a specific course with a grade. It's transferring in as kind of general credits. Can you talk about that, Kathy?
Yeah, that is one reason that you need to have all transcripts of any post-secondary coursework you've taken, including if you took a course in high school, if you took one course at an institution, because we look at each individual transcript. I know Iowa State will just say it lists the, maybe what course you got and the credits you received. We need the grade for that course too. So that is why you have to make sure that you have get a transcript from every school that you have attended, because we use every grade. It doesn't matter. We don't ignore them like Iowa State. When you transfer in, that GPA is kind of disregarded and you have an Iowa State GPA. We do not do that. We look at every course you've taken and every grade you receive. So that is why you need to have a specific transcript from any school that you've attended and taken a post-secondary course from. And that is really important, because people will say, well, it all shows up on my such and such transcript. That doesn't matter. VMCAS will not use it or will not verify your application if you do not have a transcript from each institution. That is extremely important because a lot of people pay money to VMCAS and then never get their application looked at because they didn't supply a transcript. Hopefully that explains that.
Mm-hmm. Perfect. Thank you. Can you talk a little bit about AP credits?
Okay, AP credits. If they show up on your transcript as a test out, that's fine. And whatever course that university used those AP credits to test out of. Many times they will just list you know, AP or test out credits or whatever, and just a chunk of credits. If they just list that chunk of credits, you must get a letter from your registrar saying what those credits, how they, what courses those credits fulfilled. Because you can't just say, well, I got an AP for that. We will accept the AP scores, but I found these days, especially when people have so many, it's just I've never seen institution say, no, we're not going to give you that letter. And it's really nice when you have a lot of credits just for the university, if it's not written on your transcript, to say, you know, biology 1 and 2, they gave you credit for AP credits. And whatever that course is at the institution you transferred them into. So that's what you need. Sometimes they do show on the transcript as individual courses, as a test out or something similar, or AP. Many times they don't, they just come in as a block of credits. And then that's when we need documentation from the registrar's office as to which courses those credits fulfilled.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Okay, thank you, Kathy. So question about oral communications. So obviously if you get your bachelor's degree, that is a credit towards that oral communications prerequisite, right?
Right.
So on VMCAS, do they just don't like,
you don't need to worry about it. For the 3 credits for English Comp and the 3 credits for oral communications, by having a bachelor's degree or getting one, like for this year, if you will have your bachelor's degree by the end of spring 2023, that gives you 3 credits of English Comp and 3 credits of oral communication. You do not need to worry about that. One of the first things we look at as we do the academic review is whether or not you either have or will be receiving by the end of spring a bachelor's degree. So don't worry about trying to select that. There's no way on VMCAS to select that, you know, as saying that you'll have a degree, so that's a degree covers those credits.
Okay.
Just don't worry about it. We always check on that first.
Great. Okay, thank you. So question here, does transferring colleges or taking colleges at a local community college look bad on an application?
For Iowa State, absolutely not. We have our academic review is strictly separate from the application review. We do not care where you take your courses as long as it's an accredited post-secondary institution. We accept community colleges. I mean, it doesn't matter whether you took it at you know, Benton County Community College, at a state university, Harvard or Yale. They're all considered the same. And we've done research on that. I've been at the college over 25 years. We've done it at least 4 times. And that shows that whether a student has a bunch of community college credits or just a few or none, it makes no difference on how you perform academically in vet school. So we do not look at one institution being a higher rigor than another and things like that. So for us, it does not make a difference. For other schools, it does. So this is one of the things that you really need to look at each school you plan to apply to, because this does differ from school to school.
Great. Okay, I think we have a couple more questions, and then we'll kind of keep rolling here, because I think that there's more there'll be more questions that come up too.
Oh, yeah.
So not that you can't put another academic, review related question in the Q&A, but we're going to do these two and we'll move on, and then we'll kind of come back around to those remaining questions after we cover other sections as well. So one is, if a student is starting a one-year program in August of 2022, would a transcript still be required? So like thinking about a one-year master's program or something, would they still need that transcript then, for that program?
Obviously you cannot submit it by the deadline. However, we would require that transcript by our January 20th deadline, because again, those grades would be used if you pass the academic review, and that's that 2.80 science, that those would then be calculated in with, or recalculated. So your fall grades are included. So you would not have to send it to VMCAS, but you would need to send it to Iowa State when fall transcripts are due, because we do recalculate those.
Okay, great. And then the last question is about pass-fail courses. And I know we'll talk about this a little bit when we talk about kind of some COVID exceptions or guidelines that are still in place, but kind of general overview. Can you talk about pass, not pass coursework for prerequisites?
We do not accept, except for the COVID, which we'll get to during the COVID period, we do not accept pass-fail courses. If for some reason, and I know there are some schools that at least for the first term only offer pass-fail courses, we need documentation from the school that that's the only way you could take the courses at that school. However, we do not, generally, pass-fail courses are not accepted for any prerequisite. You have to take it for a grade. And in order to fulfill the requirement, you have to have a C to fulfill the requirement. A C- does not fulfill the requirement.
Okay, great. All right, so we did kind of compile some statistics here for kind of the last couple of application cycles, so that you can see. Now, obviously, this is the mean GPA, which is not necessarily the cutoff or the ideal or anything like that, but just so you can kind of see what the required science and last 45 credit GPAs have been for the last couple of application cycles there. And then if you are a stats person, there's just a little bit more information about our class that entered last fall, right? Fall of 2021. Okay, so so just a little bit more information there. Like I said, I've got the slide deck, or a link to the slide deck in the chat, and I'll go ahead and actually paste that once more so that folks can have that. If you're interested, if you really like statistics and you want to kind of look at it a little bit more than these few minutes here that we're or a few seconds here that we've got the slide up on the screen. So okay, great. Let's head on a little bit more to the application review. If you want me to kind of do a little bit of general info, Kathy, I can.
Go right ahead.
Okay, so the application review really incorporates all of the things that you see here up here on the screen. So everything from experiences, letters of recommendation, essays, and kind of awards, honors, achievements, all of those sorts of things. So we are going to kind of break each one of these down and talk about them a little bit more in depth. So general work experience is important to include if you have kind of general work experience. So this is anything that might not be related to veterinary medicine, research, or animal experience. So like it says up here, you know, fast food places, retail stores, all of that. I think, you know, one of the things to think about is, you know, I think you'll hear some student or some people talk about it as translatable skills. So the reason we want to know about this, one is we want to kind of, again, get that well-rounded view of who you are, but also you will learn things like teamwork, customer service, good communication, organization, all of that in general work experience. And that's good for us to know too, right? Because those are essential for working as a veterinarian as well. You're going to have to work as a team. If I would like to meet a veterinarian, Kathy, who works with no other people and whose animals don't have any people associated with them as well, right? So most of the time, veterinary medicine is a people business. So show, you know, kind of telling us about those times when you've worked with people in general is a good thing. If you have those jobs. Each and every year, Kathy and I talk to students who didn't get in. And when we ask them if they put in, you know, their part-time work experience that they're telling us about, they say, well, no, you know, because they put in their veterinary experience. Well, let us know about that. We have students who don't put in any experiences that they may have gained in human medicine. Tell us about that, right? Like anything that you have done in high school and undergrad and beyond, I would say high school and older or more recent in your life,
Right.
tell us about that. So yeah, part-time jobs, absolutely.
And one thing I'd like to put in is that we did have an older student apply who actually father is a veterinarian. However, when he got out of high school, he took some community college courses, got into, I don't know what you call it, souping up cars is what I would say, and things like that. So for the past 5 years, that's what he did. He worked on race cars and things like that. He thought that was totally unnecessary. You know, it has nothing to do with vet med or animals or anything like that. But when you looked at his application, it looked like for the last 5 years, he'd done nothing. So don't leave stuff out just because you think it's so far removed from veterinary medicine that they don't care. We do care, and it makes a big difference because after we told him he really needed to put that in there, he got in. He had everything, but it looked like he'd sat around for 5 years and not did anything. So it really is important. The other thing is including work experiences is when your application's reviewed, they're going to look at and see, oh, this person worked 20 hours a week at Target while they were taking a full course load. Those are the types of things that they look at. So where was your time spent? So maybe you didn't have enough time for some extracurricular and things like that. So you need to put down, you need to make sure that you give them a good picture of what you have been doing over those years.
Yep, absolutely. So I have a question here. It's a good one. It came through in the chat. One of my advisors told me that it looks immature to include high school experiences if they were not continued in college. Is that true? So that's a great question. And it's a great question to ask every veterinary school. In general, no. So if you think about it, you know, if you are applying as an undergraduate student, your high school experiences were for, you know, 2 to 4 to 6 to maybe on the outside, you know, 8 or 10 years away. I put things on my resume that are, you know, 8 or 10 years away. It doesn't look immature. I would say now, if you put like, you know, every single, you know, itty bitty little thing that you did in high school, I don't know, we would still, I think, like to see it. But I think especially things like work experience, especially things like animal veterinary research experience that you've done in high school, absolutely put that down. That's in the scope of your professional career and in the scope of your life, that's pretty recent. So I would still include it. I would include, you know, sports maybe that you are a part of, or teams or organizations as well. So I think that there is that perception, and I've heard that from students who get that advice maybe through their career services center, which is maybe good advice if you're heading out into the workforce after college. But for veterinary schools, most veterinary schools are evaluating high school and beyond as far as experiences goes.
And I just want to point out that most people do not continue in 4-H or FFA. Most people don't have the time to continue working with those organizations. That's a huge thing, and those are considered very much in your overall animal veterinary experiences. So please put your high school stuff. If you were a varsity athlete in high school, you know, you need to put that down. So yes, please put down your high school as well as your college.
Yeah, absolutely. Okay, so let's kind of talk about animal veterinary and research experience. So this will cover, I think, a few of the pending questions in the Q&A box as well. So you want to make sure that you're putting one entry per place of employment. So, you know, if you were at a veterinary clinic and you started out as maybe a kennel technician, and you know, moved, or in the kind of front desk reception area, and you moved into more of a veterinary assistant role, or, you know, you got promoted or something like that, please put that as one entry. So you would say, you know, you worked at so-and-so veterinary clinic, and then in that description, you could say, I started out as a kennel tech, you know, through demonstrating responsibility and X number of other skills, I was, you know, asked to step into, or I asked to step into a veterinary assistant role. And then I did X, Y, and Z while I was a veterinary assistant. So, so that shouldn't be it should not be two entries, one at X clinic, you know, as a veterinary assistant, and one at the same clinic as a kennel technician. So you want to make sure that those are two separate. So variety in this, you know, I think that there are some students who think about, you know, I need to work with every single species, or every species that I might encounter in veterinary school. And that's not the case. Variety is encouraged. So we like to see when students are, you know, step outside their comfort zone, but it's not necessary. Variety could also mean that you work in a small animal emergency clinic and a small animal, you know, kind of primary care clinic. It could be, we want to kind of see that you have explored not only one veterinary clinic, but also a little bit about what else the veterinary career has to offer. We look at increasing responsibility. So anytime that you can be like, that you can kind of talk about how you increase your responsibility from when you started. Maybe you started out as shadowing at that veterinary clinic, and then they kept you on and offered you a job. You know, let us know about that. So there was a question here. I think this kind of gets, or the last one maybe, or maybe it was the first bullet point, got to your question about, or the question in here about running your own pet sitting service, and you had a total of 8 clients. Yeah. So you would say you have, you know, Kelly's pet sitting service, whatever the title of your company is, you would be the supervisor in that situation because you're running your own business. And then your 8 clients would be, you know, you could share those responsibilities that you had for those clients in the description. But that would be like that pet sitting kind of service that you provide is one experience. So then there was a question about pet ownership for Iowa State. and a number of other veterinary schools, pet ownership is not seen as quality animal experience. Yes, you may have some level of responsibility for that animal, but it's really hard when you're talking about pet ownership to know when that kind of animal experience or quality animal experience starts, and when hanging out with your dog on the couch, or, you know, hey, doing a webinar while your dog is snoring on the bed, on the bed behind you, you know, is that animal experience? Not really. I mean, I guess I'm learning that my voice puts him to sleep, but hopefully that's not the same for all, you know, all of you. But yeah, so pet ownership is just tricky. Now, so that's general pet ownership. Animal experience, or animal ownership, such as I would say, you know, animals that you use for a show or breeding, animals that you know, livestock that you have, those sorts of things. I know some folks are, at least on Iowa State's undergraduate campus, and maybe even on some of yours, they're able to work with service animals and train that, you know, train them through a program. So that is above and beyond kind of my dog snoozing, right? So think about animal ownership versus kind of general household pet experience, different things there. So if you're, I would say, if you're doing something specific with your pet, like training to be a comfort animal or something like that, that would count, but just kind of general pet ownership doesn't. We also don't include coursework as valid animal veterinary and research experience. This one gets tricky, and Kathy maybe wants to clarify this for me if I say the wrong thing, but for that, if you are, so Animal Science 101, I don't know if y'all do this in Animal Science 101, or even if you took that class, but if Animal Science 101 your instructor says, okay, for today's class, we are going out to the beef cattle farm, we are going to do this experience, we're going to come back. That doesn't necessarily, if it's within that course, kind of that course description and that syllabus, doesn't really count. Now, if you're, I see a question here kind of about that. If you're, you know, animal ecology major says, hey, an X number of hours of an internship are required for, you know, for graduation, that internship is required, is counted. Those experiences in that internship would be counted, even though it's a requirement for your degree or for a certain course. That's something that you're going out and you're kind of immersing yourself with on your own. It's not your course instructor figuratively picking you up, putting you on a teaching farm, bringing you back, going to class the next day, right? Same thing with research. If you are a research assistant and get credit for that, that's totally fine. That's different than, you know, like doing a day or observing a day in research for your course. Did I cover that, Kathy?
No, you've covered it. It's basically when you're outside the course, learning something. It's when you're actually working. You're doing something. It's not like you learn how to do AI. That's a course. But if you're at an internship, working within a specific field and doing certain things, that is experience. I know it does get tricky, but an internship is different than just going to a class or an animal handling class and things like that. Those are not considered animal veterinary experiences, but working an internship at any type of animal organization would be considered animal experience.
Great. So I'm typing an answer to this question just so I think it's a good one for folks to go back and reference, but thinking about going from, you know, shadowing to assistant to intern and all of that. Remember that whether that's, and maybe that's in a research, you know, position too, is, you know, maybe you start observing, then you go on to, you know, being an assistant and actually working with that research. That anytime your role changes at the same place, that's one entry. I promise you, you will get credit for all of your hours and all of that kind of stuff, but it helps our committee and a lot of, or our admissions folks and a lot of admissions folks kind of make sure that we're seeing, okay, so this is how that journey went versus trying to keep track of, you know, different clinics and stuff like that through, or the same clinic through over multiple entries. So, but use that description to talk about how your role there has changed. Okay. Other things that we need. Oh, I should say, so that last bullet point is do not practice veterinary medicine without a license. I think some students, well, I think that there are some maybe veterinarians who are very excited to share the profession and maybe blur that line a little bit. And I think that there are some students who, you know, maybe want to say, oh, well, you know, you want to play up the cool things that you did, right? So you say, instead of saying I observed a surgery or I assisted with this, you know, you say, oh, and I was, you know, I got to do a spay or a neuter. And it's like, ooh. So watch your wording on that to make sure that you're not listing an experience that, or listing something in that description that kind of sounds like you're practicing medicine without a license. So,
and that includes your own animals. So if you work for a veterinarian that said, sure, come in, we're gonna, you know, spay your cat or neuter your cat, whatever. No, that is technically illegal. So even if it's your own animal, so just don't do that, because sometimes that it kind of taints the experience. You know, you might have assisted, that's fine. But if you say you're doing things, yeah, you kind of look like, you know, it just kind of puts a bad light on your application overall.
Yep. Okay, there was a question about multiple roles and which one they should list as like their job title. I would go with your current job description or job title. So right now, if you're a veterinary assistant, I would list that. And then in the description, you could say, I started out as a kennel technician, or I started out shadowing here, you know, and there you go. Okay. So this question came in through the chat, and I'll remind people to use that Q&A box, which is in the toolbar, because that's typically where I go, but I did see the chat kind of light up here. So this, I think, is a good segue to watch your hours and dates of employment. So if I worked at a clinic 3 years ago and I'm working there again this summer, should I include it as one entry? Yes. VMCAS will ask you kind of your date, start and end date. They'll ask you the number of weeks worked and then the number of hours worked per week. So for you, if you started there 3 years ago, you know, and so it looks like you've, you know, been employed for 3 weeks or for 3 years, what you want to do is kind of finagle that math a little bit so that your total hours are as close to accurate as possible. And then in that description, you can say, hey, I started working there 3 years ago, you know, and I'm back now, and kind of explain the, you know, maybe date and hour discrepancy. You could even say, while I was working, you know, 3 years ago, and I've started working again, I'm averaging, you know, 25 hours per week worked. But that total is what is going to be helpful for the, you know, and I think most visible for the committee. So you want to be accurate about that. So if if you work 40 hours a week at the clinic, you know, back home, or in any, you know, maybe it's at the Starbucks back home, whatever it is, you want to say, you know, in the description, worked 40 hours a week during my breaks, even though it might look like the average because of your semesters in college, or, you know, semester work time at college during the semester, you know, that average hours worked per week might be 10, right? Because you're kind of going from the weeks that you worked 40 hours and the weeks that you worked 0 hours, and kind of meeting in the middle there. So the total number of hours, watch that, because what happens is some students say, yeah, while I was working over breaks and stuff like that, I did 40 hours a week. Well, the committee might look at that and say, oh my gosh, they had 8,700 hours of, you know, of experience. And how did they do that when, you know, when they're also going to college in a different town and all of that kind of stuff. So I would just be as realistic with hours as possible. So is that any other details that you've got?
Me?
Yeah, sorry.
No, that's it. Don't overlap things. We have people say that, okay, I'm working 20 hours a week, but then, you know, I don't know, I do FFA for another 20 hours a week, and they don't realize that they're actually overlapping their hours. And so you get a ridiculous amount of the hours. The other thing is, and I saw one question, you probably took it out, Deanna, but talking about, you know, your pet sitting, you are not actually working with the animal 24/7. We had somebody in one put down that she owned a cat for 9 years. So her hours of animal experience was 9 years times 24 hours a day. That is ridiculous. And in the veterinary profession, you've got to learn if you're putting down something ridiculous. It makes a big difference if you have, you know, like milliliters versus centiliters. I don't know. But it makes a difference. So be accurate. And if you're training, like some people might have an agility dog that they compete, that's animal experience. But how much, just because you have a dog 24/7 doesn't mean you're actually working with that dog. So maybe you work an hour with it a day in training, and then, I don't know, go to 3 agility contests or something like that during the summer. Those are the hours you count, not just the fact that you're around an animal for 24 hours a day doesn't mean you're really getting experience with that animal 24 hours a day.
Yeah, I think that's a good distinction. Thank you. So let's see. We've got a few questions here. One is, are the job description duties preferred on bullet point or typed paragraph? Be consistent. We have no we have no preference really. It's just about what you can fit in the text box. And then I would just be consistent with whatever format you're using across all of the different descriptions and things like that. When entering experiences, what should be put in the title box? I would put the job, I would put the role of that person. So if they're, you know, you could behind their name say, you know, Deanna Gerber, MS or MED, or, you know, whatever, or DV. I'm not a DVM, but, you know, so you could put that behind their name. And then when they talk about the title, you know, you would say, you know, clinic owner, or, you know, lead researcher, or, you know, store manager, or whatever it is that way. So, great. I think we answered that, but if we I think I answered that. If we had multiple roles at a vet hospital, list them, the one that you're currently in, or the most recent one if you're not there. So like the one that you kind of ended on. I'm looking through these. I've been working at the same veterinary clinic for 3 years. Would having only 1 or 2 clinics in the work experience be less competitive, even though they are a large amount of hours? Not necessarily. So we do look at quality over quantity. So like if you've been there for 3 years and you have a lot of responsibility and those sorts of things, in some ways, that is preferred over kind of bouncing from activity to activity. So I think it's kind of equal if you've had some, different experiences. So like 1 or 2 veterinary clinics, that is good. There are also committee members, who will see that variety as a good thing too. So you kind of want to balance those. I think 1 or 2 veterinary clinics is a good thing, because you're showing that longevity, and that probably, I'm assuming, an increase in responsibility. If there is a way, if you have access to shadow some, with a different veterinarian, or maybe even a different, type of clientele or patients, different types of patients, you may pursue that, or you may want to pursue that. But you also need to do what makes the most sense for you and your budget and your, mental and physical well-being as well. So, so it's a fine line. I don't think that you would be less competitive though. Okay, so on the application, it says to select up to 5 experiences that are the most important. Are these only the experiences that show up on your application, or do all experiences show up? All experiences show up. We're going to evaluate all of your experience hours. So yes, it's just kind of, I think, a way for some schools wanted to know kind of what was the most important for you. So what was the most meaningful for you? Gives a little bit of insight maybe on who you are and what you really what you valued in your preparation. So okay, so oh, good question. Yes. So this is way off topic. But the question was, will this be recorded? It is being recorded. It is being recorded. It will be up on our YouTube channel, which is, I think our YouTube channel is youtube.com/Iowa State University College of Veterinary Medicine. So yes. Okay, I think now we're getting into, we'll talk about transcript entry, we'll talk about letters of recommendation, essays, and all of that kind of stuff first. So, or, coming up here. So, this is a great question. And I think we have a chart that deals with this later, but I think it's good to kind of wrap up the experience section. If I have a job in biomedical research directed by 2 veterinarians and I am their lab animal technician, would this be considered veterinary experience or research experience? I would put it under the research heading. In reality, it's probably not going to matter, right, Kathy?
No, it's not going to, it wouldn't matter, but I would say specifically, since even though they're veterinarians that are directing the research, this is truly research, not veterinary. Even though I know VMCAS says if you're supervised by a veterinarian, then it's veterinary experience. But generally, people look at veterinary experience as practice experience. And this definitely would fit the research area. And it's good to have different areas as well.
Yep, absolutely. Okay, so question here about kind of, there's one more question. Sorry, I thought this was a course credit question, but it's not, after I read the whole thing. So this is, so if you have class credit that are leadership experiences like being a TA, or direct animal training experiences like fostering or training, Is it recommended to add those to experiences, or would it just go on your transcript? Add it to your experiences too, because there's no kind of description or place to describe, being the credits earned through being a TA on your transcript entry. So you want to make sure that people know, what you did and all of that kind of stuff, those duties. So definitely put being a TA or something like that as an experience, as well as if it shows up on your transcript, listing it in your transcripts too. So it may be in two different places. That's okay. Okay. I assisted with a vet with her daily horse care. Would this be listed as veterinary experience or animal experience? If it was general, just animal experience, so even the horses that you were taking care of were owned by a veterinarian, but your job description was essentially animal caretaker, I would list that as animal experience. Now, if those, horses were, somehow used in her veterinary clinic, that would be veterinary experience. But you would, if you're just in general taking care of horses, the owner just happens to be a veterinarian, it's still animal experience. Yep. But good question. Good distinction there, definitely. Oh, is it frowned upon if we say not to contact the organization listed, for example, government protected, and no way to directly contact them, or if a business has been closed down? Kathy?
That does not make,
okay.
That wouldn't make any difference. I guess the things that would be more red flagged would be if, you worked for a vet for say 3 years and you don't have a recommendation and you say not to contact them. That would kind of be a red flag to the people. But in general, in most cases, we will never contact these people. When when a red flag comes up, we don't know what's going on. So therefore, again, that's just something where it kind of puts a bias in there as to why can't we contact? You can put in it this business, if the business closed, no problem at all. Just say this business no longer exists. I don't quite understand the government part of it. Government protected. I mean, if you can't contact, a lot of people don't even put like their supervisor or whatever. You can put it in. It probably won't be valued as much. But I don't think it would make a difference, without seeing your whole application, I don't think it would make a big difference. The thing I'd be afraid of is if it's a job that you're putting down as an experience and then you say don't contact them, that is concerning. And that again is one of those little things that just puts a little bias against your application.
Okay, thank you. All right, I think we will move on to letters of recommendation, knowing again that you can kind of, we'll come back around to any questions that we're missing at the end of our time too. But so letters of recommendation, 3 are required, 4 are recommended. We will accept up to 6. We do suggest 4 letters of recommendation only because we have had it. We've had instances, I think every single year since we started requiring letters of recommendation, that one recommender might miss a deadline. And in that case, we do not accept late work at all in any circumstance, mostly. So if you requested 3 letters of recommendation, someone missed that deadline, you are down to 2 letters and technically your application is incomplete. So if you have those 4 letters and somebody misses that deadline, you still have 3 required letters. They're, we don't count against you, counted against you if you requested 4 and only 3 showed up. I don't think even would know about that. So, so I always think it's good to have a buffer in there essentially. So, but we will read up to 6. That's the limit to the number that you can put into the VimCast system. They should represent a well-rounded view of who you are. So I know some students, we do say one is strongly encouraged to be from a veterinarian. And so some students are like, well, I have 4 veterinarians that I know, and I'm going to ask them all, which is fine if they have a little bit of variety. Say one is your academic advisor happens to be a veterinarian, you worked at a small animal hospital and maybe a production animal specific clinic, that shows a good variety. But if you have 4 veterinarians that who are all from the same emergency medical clinic, maybe it's small animal specific emergency medical clinic, they're probably going to write a very similar letter. So what I would challenge you to do is to think about what qualities you want, what qualities that you possess, and what, maybe commitments to learning about the veterinary profession or to your professional career that you really have honed over the years, and who might be able to speak to those qualities. So maybe you want to talk about how, you really work well with other people and you love being a member of a team. Maybe that's a coach that you want to write that letter of recommendation. Maybe it's your, I always fall back on, I worked at Starbucks through my collegiate career, and you do have to, know how to be a team member, or, a member of a team, especially when it's really busy and it's early morning and people want their coffee. So I might ask my supervisor at Starbucks to write me a letter of recommendation, asking them to talk about, my ability to work with team members and customers in general too. So that's what I would do, is I would challenge you to think about what qualities do I possess that I want the admissions committee at Iowa State or wherever else you're applying to know about, and who might be able to best speak to those qualities. So it is way better for someone to know you well who can speak to those qualities than somebody who is well known. If you have met the president of your college or university once and you think, oh, it'll be impressive if I can get a letter from that president, we'd rather have somebody who knows you well than has a title, a prestigious title. So we'll talk about this a little bit more when we talk about how to enter those in, but keep in mind that they will receive a link immediately when you save their information in VimCast. And I know there's a question about the Texas system and letters of recommendations. I don't know if it's the same way with Texas or not, but through VimCast, they will receive a link to an evaluation and to upload their letter of recommendation immediately. So maybe tell them about that. Talk to them about that before you save their information in. Otherwise, they're going to get this email and they're going to be confused. It is okay, and I would say it is advised to ask for a good or great letter of recommendation. So what I encourage students to do is think of, sitting down over a cup of coffee or lunch or whatever it is with that person who you'd like to ask you to, write a letter of recommendation and say, hey, this is why I'm excited to go to veterinary school. I'm, have appreciated your mentorship, whatever you want to say. And then I would say, do you feel comfortable writing me an outstanding letter of recommendation? or would you feel comfortable? That gives them the opportunity to say, you know what, ooh, have you thought about asking so-and-so? Or, I'd really like to, but I'm super busy right now. And I just don't think I can, maybe make it as, as quality of a letter or whatever, right? It kind of gives them that out if they want it. But that I think comes across a little bit differently, especially for, your fellow professionals than, hey, looking for that letter from, or for vet school, or even like hey, I need a letter of recommendation for vet school, right? So, so sit down, have a conversation with them. I think it's perfectly okay if you say, if they say, yeah, I'm excited to write you a letter of, recommendation for vet school, you won't stop talking about how much you want to be a veterinarian and I'm excited for you. And then you can say, okay, great. I'm really hoping that you might talk about those qualities, right? Those qualities that you've thought of, that you thought, okay, this person can talk to that. Maybe it's your ability to work with animals, or maybe it's your interest in the veterinary profession if you're talking to a veterinarian. So, so it's okay to talk, talk to that person and even give them some ideas. You don't want to write the letter for them. You don't want to dictate that letter, but it's okay to give them some ideas. I know for folks that I've written letters of recommendation for, it really helps me out to kind of get those details. And then I can say, absolutely, I know the student, I can give, 3 or 4 good examples of how the student, is a leader or, has good communication skills or whatever it is, right? So it's okay to kind of have that conversation with them through that. You cannot submit a letter of recommendation, or you cannot request a letter of recommendation from someone who is related to you by blood or by marriage. Sometimes this overlaps with the one letter from a veterinarian, right? If you have been doing veterinary experience with a relative, you've probably learned a ton, unfortunately, because that is clashing then with that, cannot be related to you. You may not submit a letter of recommendation from a veterinarian. You may want to kind of break out of your comfort zone and find another veterinarian. Maybe your relative who is a DVM can, suggest another person who's not related to you to shadow or to work with for a little bit. So, so they can, so yeah, so you may still want to pursue a letter from a veterinarian or some experiences with a veterinarian who's not related to you. I know some students think that 6 is way better than 3 or 4, 6 letters of recommendation. It can be, but it can also not be if you're just kind of gathering letters to gather letters. So really think through strategically about that. So,
Deanna,
okay. Yes.
There's a question here I think fits right in this. It says, I've worked at my grandpa's ranch or farm for 2+ years. He is my boss. I know I cannot have him write a letter of recommendation, but can I put this in experience section with him as my supervisor?
Absolutely. Yes. Yeah. So your experiences can be with people that you are related to, not a problem at all. They can be your supervisors. They just can't write you a letter of recommendation. So, yep. Great question. Great question. Is it okay to ask your high school sport coach for a letter of recommendation? I would say that this kind of ties into the next question that is about a letter of recommendation from a job experience 3 years ago. So what I would say is they should know you well. So if you've kept in touch with them, say, you go back and you watch the, you attend your team's sporting events and you like catch that coach up on what you're doing and stuff like that. Or you go back to that job every once in a while and you chat with the supervisor. If you've kept in touch with them, I think that's totally fine. Totally fine. We have no limit, or time limit on those letters of recommendation. But again, I think it is, you want someone who knows you well. and can speak to your abilities. So if that person, if you're like, yes, my coach knows me still, or, knows me and can speak to those abilities, awesome. That boss that I had 3 years ago, I feel like they still know me. They can speak to, my abilities during that job. Perfect. Great. So there is not really a time limit there. Okay, I think that next question kind of bundles in there too. That's great. Okay. Okay, this is the part of when we talk about knowing who is writing your letter of recommendation. So they should know you well, but you should also know them. So know who your references are, sorry. And it's okay to kind of anticipate what they might say about you, right? This is an outstanding letter of recommendation. I mean, I think that there were details. This is not the only thing that they wrote, but this was kind of the concluding paragraph. So great. This is a letter that, we expect kind of to see from folks who are devoting time to learning about the profession. Unfortunately, we also get letters of recommendation that look like this. Now, this is not to terrify you about asking anybody for a letter of recommendation, but my question is, for any one of these students, I wonder what that conversation around the letter of recommendation was. I wonder how well they truly knew this person, or this person truly knew them. I think, these are very rare in the thousands, or, in the 1,000, almost 2,000 applications that we get, and the 3 to 6 letters of recommendation a piece. These are 3 very rare examples, but it can happen. So definitely think about those letters of recommendation, who you're asking, and what they might put in there. So, okay. I think I'm going to go through the Q&A just to make sure I didn't miss any letter of recommendation talk. I know, so Emily, your question about the Texas versus VMCAS, excuse me, I will, yeah, so we'll talk about that as we talk about letter of experience entry in just a little bit, but great question. Okay. So let's move on. Yes, let's move on. Okay, so let's move on to community service, leadership, all of that kind of stuff. I know we had a question about blood donation. That's awesome. Put that down. I think we have community service through FFA. Great. Put that down. Now, if you're already entering in animal, like FFA is an animal experience, in that description, talk about your community service. You do not need to list that as a second entry under community service, right? But these are just things that, as we're looking through your experiences, your honors, all of that kind of stuff, we're trying to kind of pick out, oh, okay, they did community service here, or, oh, they really broke out of their comfort zone, here, and we'll kind of give some personal development points, all of that. So you don't necessarily have to have like, okay, here is my community service column, here are my leadership things, but definitely point those out, especially leadership can be, maybe you were, like promoted to a trainer, maybe you or a supervisor, at your job. So that tells us that you are honing those leadership skills. So we'll, kind of be able to kind of glean some of that through your different experiences too. Okay. So, yes.
Just one thing, and I only bring this up because my daughter did this, the blood donation, that's great. Just if you're donating plasma and getting paid for it, please don't put that down. because that really isn't community service because they're paying you for it. And I know that that's a big thing here in Ames as a college town. And so, but if you go to, if you go to regular just blood donation clinics that they have around, so that you're donate, that's an excellent community service. But if you're being paid for it, not so much.
Yep. Yep. Perfect. Thank you. That's a good clarification. All right. So yeah, we talk about like personal development. There are some kind of points that are given for that. We do look at special circumstances. So there is an explanation statement in VMCAS, where you can put essentially anything that you feel like didn't have a space, or you didn't have a space to put that in any other part of the application. Sometimes this is a little bit more context to your story. If, say, you were also taking care of a sick relative, or, you want to talk a little bit more about your, career change, although I would argue that you should put that in your other essay too, or your other, your main essay. But the explanation statement is a way to kind of fill in any other information. I think a lot of students think, because we do say it's helpful to, if you had a rough semester or a rough year, put in some details about that if you would like to. So say you had to take a semester off, or, something else major was going on, global pandemic sort of things, you can put in there as well. It is not a space to say, you'll see that I had a 4.0 and this one semester was really tough for me and I ended up with all A's and 1 B. I can understand how for a 4.0 student, that would be a challenging semester, if you did get a B, whatever else was going on, right? I can understand that. There are folks out there that, and I've been in this situation, I think more in my graduate school career, is like, oh my gosh, I need that A, right? However, I promise you that I can't promise you, because I think we did have maybe one student graduate from this last class that had a 4.0, but the majority of students are not going to have a 4.0 in vet school. A good number of students are going to get less than a B on especially their first anatomy and anatomy test. So what that would do to the admissions committee, or what that might signal to the admissions committee, is that, this person may not be able to handle that, those challenges that come up in vet school, where you're probably not going to get the 4.0, right? So when we talk about a challenging semester, we're talking about a semester that, you're getting, maybe you go from A's and B's and you're getting C's and D's and having to retake some courses, or, you're having to go down to part-time because of life happens, life things that are happening. So special circumstances, more about life things that are happening versus, maybe a semester that's maybe not up to what you believe that bar should be. So, yeah. Question is, would making the dean's list and president? Yeah, that's a great thing to put in the honors section. If you make the dean's list, now that is one entry. So say you make the dean's list for 3 semesters in your undergraduate career, dean's list is one entry. In the description, you can say, achieve this in fall and spring of 2022 and the spring of 2023, or whatever. That's not correct, because you won't know dean's list for 2023 yet, but that sort of thing. So make those, kind of consolidate those as well. So great question. So there is also some COVID impacts, that you could put in there as well. This is, I think we maybe even have another slide on this, but you can talk about how, if your experience was impacted or your gaining of experience is impacted, because of COVID, you can put that down as well. You can kind of talk about that. Now, I think that, yeah, you can talk about that. The other thing too to think about is that we do accept for winter 2020 to spring 2021 or through spring of 2021, we do accept pass, not pass, or satisfactory, unsatisfactory coursework. So that's the exception that Kathy was talking about earlier when we were talking about academics. And that's listed on our website. I think it might even be listed in BIMCAS on our information page. If not, our website is linked to that. So yeah, kind of thinking about that. Okay. Let's move on to essays. Then after essays, I promise you we'll take a short break, I think. We'll talk about Casper and then we'll take a short break. Okay. Essays. The first VMCAS essay is is there anything else, Kathy, or no? You're good.
No.
Okay. Okay. So essentially this essay states, who are you and why do you want to be a veterinarian, right? I would encourage you to think about writing this as a statement of purpose. What is your purpose for pursuing this career, this medical career? Okay. So they call it a statement of purpose, or a personal statement. I would challenge you to think about it as a statement of purpose. VMCAS has a bunch of helps and all of that for the essay that have really, really good pointers in it too. You'll also write an essay for Iowa State that is about how you would contribute to our goal of encouraging diversity throughout the veterinary profession. This isn't necessarily what makes you diverse. I think some students think, well, the majority of applicants right now are all across the nation are white women. And so some students who identify as white women are like, well, how do I make this diverse? It can be about how you advocate for diversity, how you have kind of gotten out of your comfort zone and have worked with people outside of, who have a different background from yourself. And diversity comes in all sorts of different categories, right? So we think of race and ethnicity, we think of, gender identity and sexuality, we think of socioeconomic standing, we think of different religious backgrounds, different ability levels, different beliefs and ideals, all of that. So I would challenge you to think about how I can contribute to or support that goal versus this is why I'm diverse, right? That's not what that's not necessarily what this statement or what this essay is asking, right? Is in what ways are you diverse specifically? Now, if you want to talk about how, in what ways you are diverse, that's okay to do, but I would challenge you to think about that in kind of a larger scale or a larger scope. I will say that you will probably encounter that sort of essay question from multiple different schools. Sometimes they're asked a little bit differently, so you may not be able to copy and paste the same essay for multiple schools, but I think you'll be able to kind of tweak or reword a little bit and utilize the same essay for the most part for different schools. Okay, so somebody has asked how long the essay should be. So you have 3,000 characters. We don't necessarily judge by length, we judge by quality. So if you use, 2,500 characters and someone else uses 2,750 characters, that doesn't make a difference, right? But I think what you'll find is it will be challenging to limit yourself to 3,000 characters, and this is characters, not words, versus, you know, feeling like you are a need to add to that. So, so your essay should be as long as it takes to answer that question about essentially what is your purpose for pursuing this career. Okay. Things to consider. Proofread. We talked about it in the beginning. Well, I'll talk about it now. Proofread that essay. If you are currently enrolled in a collegiate institution or in a post-secondary education institution, you probably have access to a writing, I know at Iowa State it's called the Writing and Media Center. It's a great resource. Have somebody else proofread your essay, somebody who doesn't know you, so they're not like filling in the blanks of like, oh, I know what they were trying to say there, right? You may have somebody who knows you well, who can review it and be like, hey, you forgot to talk about kind of this thing that you've always taught, you know, you've always kind of mentioned anytime you talk about your aspirations of being a veterinarian, all of that, right? So have somebody who doesn't know you, who can look at content, make sure it makes sense. You may have somebody else who knows you, who can kind of make sure that you're, you know, that you're being true to who you are and why you want to be a veterinarian. I think, you know, we used to call it spell check, and now it's, you know, more about, you know, grammar check too. While I think that kind of version of AI is getting a little bit better, right, at kind of knowing what we're talking about and doing the blue underlines instead of the red underlines. Doesn't always work. So make sure that you have like human eyes looking through that, especially like, I think the biggest thing is, you know, I know that veterinary versus veterinarian sometimes get kind of interchanged, and really when you're talking about the person, it is a veterinarian. When you're talking about a describing word, it is a veterinary, or you use veterinary. So like you go to a veterinary clinic and work with a veterinarian. That's the best way to kind of say it. Anyway, be realistic with those career goals. If you want to someday be able to use your skills to give back to your community, that's awesome. You will also have, in most cases, pretty hefty student loans. So an unrealistic career goal, I think by our committee standards and probably other veterinary schools committee standards, would be you know, as soon as I get out of veterinary school, I'm going to open up a completely free clinic where I'm going to, you know, provide medical care for folks in the community who need it. Awesome. How are you going to pay the people who work at your clinic? How are you going to pay for your, you know, your tools, your equipment, your building, your student loans, your meals, all of that kind of stuff? So it's okay to have those aspirations to give back to your community, but also have a business plan. If you say, you know what, I'm gonna work at a veterinary clinic, and for 4 hours on a Saturday, I'm gonna, you know, maybe put something in place where people can donate their time or their money to folks who need veterinary care and can't have it. Awesome, right? So be realistic with that. Use examples. So you do not have to regurgitate all of your experiences, but you might say, hey, I learned that a veterinarian really has to be compassionate when I was working with Dr. So-and-so and this thing happened. You want to make sure that you are professional as well. I think, you know, you want to be cautious about, you can tell a story or you can write a narrative without being dramatic in a way that's like a creative writing essay, right? you don't want your essay to start out with, "It was a dark and stormy night," right? But you might talk about the catalyst for, really your interest in veterinary medicine was when you got to experience emergency medicine, right? And all of the different kind of decisions that were made at a fast pace. That might be a way to, like to describe that, like it was a dark and stormy night. My car came careening towards my dog and we had to take him to the, veterinarian and and all of that, right? You can say, hey, my first experience was, emergency medicine. And that's, what really made me think about this career, and then kind of move forward from there. And yeah, that kind of goes into the be professional sort of thing. So, great question here. Who reads our essays we submit, as part of our application? Do you want to talk a little bit about our reviewers, Kathy?
Yes. We have university employees. The committee used to read them. With the numbers increasing and wanting to be able to review more, we have now university employees that will read and go through your application based on the rubric that is created by the admissions committee. So they are basically applying specific criteria to what you have written and what they've looked at. They are trained reviewers. My thought, last year was the first time we did this, is that they are actually putting more effort into sticking with the rubric and paying more attention to your application. When the committee was reviewing, these people already have a 40+ hour a week job, and to have to each review about 300 or so applications just was not a good situation anymore. So we have these reviewers, and the rubric that they do is created by the admissions committee, and they are trained to use that rubric appropriately. They're trained on implicit bias in different areas, and so far it's worked really well for the first year that we did it, and it will continue this year.
Great, thank you, Kathy. Okay, so let's talk just briefly about Casper, and then we will take a little stand-up break. So Casper is an online situational judgment test. There are actually free practice tests if you go to the link there, and you can kind of see what that looks like. So it essentially measures about 10 competencies that we can't know about you, or maybe it's harder to glean from you, looking at like experiences and transcripts. So it's more like those kind of soft skills, essentially. You are going to take it once per application cycle. So fortunately or unfortunately, depending on who you are, you cannot pay to retake it more, in the same application cycle. That being said, unfortunately, you can't, fortunately or unfortunately, if you're reapplying, you'll take it again during that. So essentially what they do is they measure all of the students who took it on the same test date. And they will evaluate your test, give a score for that test. And then they're going to kind of see how those tests line up in a little bit of a bell curve sort of thing. So we will receive kind of a percentile or a Z-score for how you did on that test. So I can't remember now, Kathy, if this cycle they're going to be able to see their percentile.
They won't actually, because the Casper test is actually looked over by people. So it's not there, it can't be run through like GRE, there's a right and wrong answer. With Casper, there isn't necessarily a right or wrong
Yep.
answer.
Yep.
And so you will have to wait for your scores. I know somebody asked what would be a good score. Well, using the percentiles, if you're in the 99th percentile, I do not believe there is a 100th percentile. But if you're in the 99th percentile, so if they give us a 99%, that means you're above, am I saying this right, Deanna? So you would get all 10 points. So the lower percentile you're in, if you're in the 50, that means you did better than 50% of the group. If you're in the 99 percentile, it means you're better than 99% of those that took the test that day. So the higher the percentile, the better the score.
Yep.
But the actual, if you use z-scores, 0 is the best, because you're either above, which is better, or below, which is worse, and that gets really confusing. I'm afraid I cannot explain that to you.
Okay. Great. Thank you. Thank you for that clarification. So, oh yes, question was, can I put the Casper link in the chat? I absolutely can. So I think it's not going to come up as a hyperlink, unfortunately, but it's right there and you can copy and paste it. Oh, takealtis.com/Casper. If you go to www.takealtis.com, that is going to take you to their kind of Altis suite is what they call it. There's 3 evaluations that you can do. But we are only looking for the Casper test. Altis may encourage you to do snapshot, which is essentially a recorded interview. You do not have to do that. It is not required for Casper or for Iowa State. And I'm not sure that very many, if any, veterinary schools are using snapshot. Most or of the veterinary schools that require Casper, most are looking for just the Casper test. But there are, if you go there, you can find you can find the list of veterinary schools that are requiring it, plus the dates for those tests too. So great. Okay, we do not, question was, we do not have, or what is considered a good GRE score. We do not require the GRE, nor will we evaluate that. So, there you go. Great. I think we covered all of the Casper scores. So we will, I know we've got still a lot to cover here. And my dog is going to start barking. So it's a great time to take a break. So we'll take about a maybe even shorter, if we come back at 11:07, I think that will give us some time to, so just a 4-minute break, but if you need 7 minutes or 10 minutes, go for it. I know we've been sitting for a while, or I have at least. So we will reconvene here at 11:07, but knowing that this is recorded, and you'll be able to kind of catch up if you do need to take a longer break. Absolutely take that. And then we'll come back and answer some more of these questions. So great. Thank you. again. Oh, let me turn on closed captioning or subtitles again. There we go. So I did in the break, just because I was thinking about them, I did type some answers to questions that maybe needed a little bit more clarification, or were questions that you maybe didn't fit into some sections. It's like the explanation statement didn't fit into some sections in the next few slides. So you should be able to see the answered tab and see those questions answered or typed out answers there too. So let's get into a little bit more about the VMCAS or application details. So in VMCAS, so that national application, you are going to see your application go through a few different statuses. So you'll see in progress, that's when you're putting everything in, received when you've hit submit and they have essentially received your application fee. This does not have to be when all of your letters of recommendation or your transcripts are in. You can actually hit submit before that. But excuse me, it will be received, but obviously not complete or verified. So after that, then your status will be complete or completed, I guess, and then it will be ready for VMCAS to take a look at how you entered your transcripts versus how they received, or how you entered your coursework versus the transcript they received. And then verified is after that audit of your transcripts, and you have all of your other information in there. So just a little bit about your journey through the application process there. This is your dashboard. You may see that as, or you may kind of recognize that if you've opened up an application before. You'll see a bunch of different tabs up at the top. Definitely check your status. That is where you find some really, really helpful information about what is in, what is still pending, all of that kind of stuff. So Kathy, actually, I don't know if you want to, I'm looking through some of these questions and they're kind of wrapping up from our last section. Would you want to type answers to some of those?
Yep, I can do that.
Sweet. Sounds good. Thank you. So be looking for those as they filter out, if that's, or I can hang out here a little bit afternoon so that if you want to review some of those answers, you can too. You'll see here a little bell that will have your notifications. It'll have a bunch of different notifications, but it will let you know when things have arrived and all of that sort of stuff. Check status will be, you can check the status of your transcripts as well as your letters of recommendation. And you can kind of do some other things, like you can see kind of where you're at with different schools there too. So checking your status page here is a good thing. That's just that kind of, like kind of broken out a little bit. So the help center, well, I think Kathy and I know a little bit about the VMCAS application. We can navigate it. We can, kind of tell you what are some good practices. The VMCAS help section or center is wonderful. There's a lot of information in there. That is a good first stop. The other thing now that they've added is a live chat function. That is, like I said, super helpful. My student and I, a student that I was helping yesterday, and I utilized it. It works very, very well. There's also an email address too. So if you have VMCAS questions or questions about like, how do I enter this, or navigating VMCAS, it's best to go specifically to them. One of the things that you noticed probably on the last, or, that you've noticed in your VimCast portal, if you've opened up an application, is that there are 4 quadrants. So the first quadrant is personal information. It is pretty self-explanatory. You're going to fill out personal information like you see here. The next section is called supporting information. So that's where you see your essays, your letters of recommendation. You'll see your experiences, achievements, all of that kind of stuff is right there. So that's a great, this I think is probably one of the quadrants where you'll spend the most time in. So let's talk a little bit. I know that there was that question about the procedural things about VimCast or about letters of recommendation. So this is what you will see. You will ask there, or you'll enter in information. You can give them a due date that is different than September 15th. So you might talk with that, person, and you might say, okay, I'm so excited that you're going to write me a fantastic letter of recommendation talking about my, abilities to work with animals and my love of the veterinary profession. I'm hoping to get everything, complete for my application a little bit ahead of the deadline. So, I'd really like to set September 1st as our deadline. Or you can even say, hey, I'd like it to be August 15th so I know everything's in before my next semester starts. That is kind of the surface deadline, I guess you could say. If they miss that deadline that you have sent or you have set, they still have until September 15th. So it's just a way for them to be like, hey, we have this earlier deadline. May work really well if you have folks in your life that maybe are not so great at hitting the deadlines. They can not hit that first deadline, but still have, 2 to 3 to 4 to 6 weeks, to get that in before that September 15th, depending on, what deadline you have or what due date you've sent. There's a way for you to enter in a personal message. So you might, give them, maybe remind them about the conversation you had. You can waive your right to access that information or this recommendation. I think that there is a level of trust there by saying, yes, I waive my right. That means, so it's a little bit backwards. If you say yes to that question, it means that you will not see the letters of recommendation and cannot see the letters of recommendation. You essentially say, whatever, they're going to write their own thing. I'm not going to worry about seeing it, right? If you say no to that question, that means that you may be able to access that letter of recommendation, typically not before the deadline, but in order to review or whatever. So I think if you feel the need to say no, that you would like to, if you feel the need that you would like to not waive your right to see the letter of recommendation. So if you click no, I would be interested in, why you feel like you want to see that letter, right? What is it about that person that asked? If it's just curiosity, ask them. Maybe say you waive your right and you get to thinking about it and you're like, oh, maybe I would like to see, ask him. I know for my letters of recommendation, I entered a graduate program. My recommenders actually, all without me prompting them, said, oh yeah, here I uploaded it, sent it in case you want a copy. Here's what, here's what I wrote. So some folks will do that for you. But that waive the right thing, I just think it's a trust thing. And, you want to make sure that you trust and feel comfortable with those letters of or those recommenders. You'll, hopefully you'll give us permission to talk to those or connect with those letters of recommendation. Typically we don't, unless, there's a corrupted file for their letter that they upload. Or they are, we don't typically contact them unless there's something happening there where we need to, but in general, we won't. And then so when you hit that save your recommendation report, they are going to get an email that looks like this. I think I got this about 30 seconds after I hit submit, because I submitted a letter of recommendation on my application that got sent to me. So me with a different email address, but just to kind of give you an example of what the recommender sees too. So you can see there, it's got my custom due date there. It's got my my personal thing, and then it has this link here. So when you click on the link, you get this dashboard. It's super nice for maybe veterinarians who work with a number of pre-veterinary students or advisors. But you can see there again that it will even actually tell them that the access has been waived, where they're applying to, what programs the student is applying to, and then that requested by date. When they hit the start button, they'll fill out some information here. They will have a evaluation to fill out too. One of the things you'll notice there is that on this whole thing, there is a question that is ability to handle animals. There is a question about understanding the veterinary profession. Outside of that, those other kind of attributes can be observed in a number of different situations, right? So it's not necessarily just all about veterinary medicine. And even for those students, or for those people who maybe didn't, are outside of your world, your veterinary medicine world, there's a not observed. So they can just say, hey, I, as their coach, I did not observe them working with animals. Unless you count the other players or something, but they might not know your understanding of the veterinary profession. They might though, if you talk about nothing but vet school while you're playing soccer or whatever, like they might know that. So they'll fill out that evaluation. And then then they will upload, and you'll notice it's required. They will upload a letter of recommendation here. So that is letters of recommendation from kind of the recommender's perspective. Question here. So 2 questions here. One, do you need to have all of your letters of recommendation submitted before you submit the application? No, as long as you have your recommenders listed in the application and that kind of initial email to them is sent out, don't have to worry about that. You can submit before they do. And then can we still add schools after sending out letter of recommendation requests? Yes. They might not see those schools listed, but yes, you can add and take away schools up until the deadline if you want to. Okay. I'm trying to think or look to see if there's any other recommendation questions. So Emily, I hope that kind of gave you a little bit of an idea of kind of how this compares to the Texas procedures. Yeah. Okay. Let's go on to experiences. I know there were a couple of questions about that. So let's talk about, we kind of went over most of this, no preferences as far as bullet or paragraph, but let's talk a little bit about organizing or categorizing those experiences. So essentially, to think about animal, veterinary, and or research experience, you've got this here to kind of help you out. Now, again, if it's veterinary research and you put it in the research category, okay, it's where you're not going to lose points because of that. I think the only thing that that would be kind of funky is that if it was research with PhDs, maybe you did research in psychology or sociology, I would not list that as veterinary research, right? But in general, if it's veterinary research and you have it landing in animals or if it's veterinary experience, that may be overlapping with like research, and you put it in veterinary experience versus research experience or vice versa, it's not a big deal. But this kind of gives you an idea of maybe how that thought process of where you would categorize those experiences. So I think that there might be oh yeah, okay. So nope, I think that's okay. So thinking about experiences while we're here, there's a question about if I sponsor a child and write them back and forth through the organization. I'm not sure where to list that or how you would tally hours. Kathy, can you kind of give insight into
I'm
that
sorry,
one?
I was typing a question. What was the question?
Oh, this is Vanessa's question in the Q&A. So I sponsor a child and write back and forth to them.
Okay,
I would say that would be volunteer. I would.
Yeah, I mean, that would definitely be a volunteer type of experience.
Yeah.
So that would be, again, even though it's international, it's still community service.
Yeah.
More or less.
And what I would probably do is reflect on, like, maybe do you send a letter once a month? And does it take you maybe an hour to read that letter and send one back? So I would again, just kind of be realistic in that. So maybe it is, an average of 1 hour worked per month, which would be about a quarter of an hour worked per week, again, it's more about kind of what you did versus the quantity of hours. So that's what I would do, is just kind of say, okay.
The other things is what have you learned from doing this? It's kind of important to what are you getting out of this experience? So that would be something that I would include in the description part.
Yep, absolutely. Okay. All right, so let's talk about transcripts. I know we have a bunch of questions about that. So we're going to go, so you'll see this academic history. You're going to kind of take each one of these sections as they pertain to you. So this is just a little bit about transcripts. So and I know Kathy said this earlier, you request all of your transcripts, including, places that you've transferred from, community college or college courses taken in high school, and non-prerequisite courses. So if you took, Kathy is rubbing off on me and she always uses this example, if you took underwater basket weaving at a community college just for fun one summer, you get to collect that transcript as well. So every single every single college course that you have taken. You will include planned and in progress courses like we talked about. We do need to know that. And if those change, please let us know. So if you say you're going to take biochemistry in the fall of 2022, and you end up waiting until the spring of 2023 to take that, let us know about it, because our team will be looking for that course, earlier than maybe when you're taking it. So, professional transcript entry, questions about that you have, we'll talk about it maybe just in the next slide too, but those questions all go to VMCAS. We cannot help with that at all. But and then fall and spring of 2023, fall 2022, spring 2023 transcripts will be sent to Iowa State directly. So CVM underscore IA state or underscore transcripts at iastate.edu. If you go to our future students website and you click apply, you are going to find all of this information on there as well. So, Kathy, if they applied beforehand, do they need to resubmit transcripts, even if they didn't take additional classes?
If no additional classes were taken, no, you do not need to submit. The VMCAS will have everything just as it has been. You wouldn't have to add anything to your transcript entry and things like that. You only need to send new transcripts if you've taken courses since the time you last applied.
Great, thank you. So if we took classes at a different college, do we need to include the transfer class equivalents at the university that you graduated from? So it's showing up, I think, as a transfer credit course on the, I don't know if that's
showing up. If you're going to Iowa State now, but it shows that you transferred credits from the University of Wisconsin, you would need the University of Wisconsin transcript.
Right, and those courses will be listed there, not under Iowa State universities.
Correct.
Yep.
Correct. You would list them under the University of Wisconsin.
Yep. Perfect. Okay, great. One of my transcripts does not include credit hours. There is an attachment sheet that states how many credits different course numbers have. I use this to fill out VMCAS. Perfect. Will this affect its approval of the transcript?
That's a VMCAS.
Yeah, it is a good question for VMCAS. Yep. I would hazard a guess that they are going to also, have that attachment sheet if it gets sent with the transcripts, and it will go through. But the thing about VMCAS is when they go through that verification, if they see discrepancies, they are going to contact you and have you fix those. So yeah, that is, they're gonna kind of work through that with you. Taylor, good question. Professional transcript entry. I kind of describe it as reversing the process. So with professional transcript entry, you are going to pay a fee to have VMCAS enter in your coursework for you. So you will send your transcripts into VMCAS. They will enter in the coursework as it's shown on your transcript. They are going to notify you that you need to look over your transcript and make sure that they have done things correctly. They're humans as well. So, they may have an error, and then you're going to send it back and say, yes, I believe this is correct. So that's the paid service called professional transcript entry. If you enter your transcripts yourself, you're going to take, an unofficial copy of your transcripts or whatever, or a degree audit, whatever it is, and you're going to enter in every single class that you've taken, just like it would appear on your transcript. You're going to send your transcripts into VMCAS. They're going to see what you entered in and the transcript, and they are going to match those up. That's that verification process. And then if they find discrepancies, they're going to let you know about them, and you're going to work to fix those. So I think it really, neither one is preferred by Iowa State. We have no preference. I don't even think we know if you do the professional transcript entry. So it's completely up to you. There is a fee associated with it. So I know for some students, it's, the process, the application process is expensive. It's also time consuming. So some students, say, well, I'll pay for professional transcript entry. It'll save me time. Some students say, I'll take the time to do my own transcript entry and save the money. Whatever works for you is what is best, so there we go. Okay, So transcript entry. So this is what kind of that transcript entry will look like. So you'll click that you are a freshman, don't mind that I'm, was a freshman in 2004. But this is what that would look like. So you would have the course code as it appears on your thing, your transcript, the course title, the subject, and then the credits there. So question here, not sure if you two can answer this, but as far as selecting a term, how would I navigate selecting a term if I was in high school or took the class in the summer? Like summer 1 or summer 2 options. So in high school, just add that to your freshman year, I'm pretty sure. So if you took like courses for college credit in high school, I think that you just, add those to your freshman.
No, the term that they take it would be the actual term. So if she took it, say she graduated from high school, say in the spring of 2020. I know that's probably not right, but if you graduate in spring of 2020, but you also took a course, the term you took the course would be spring of 2020.
Okay.
And you would just put that down as your freshman, I guess, freshman year of college. I know because you would use the term. So you started at that college in spring of 2020, regardless of if you were still in high school or not.
Got it. Okay. I think so. I think it makes sense. Question here about would I need a transcript from military education if it includes credit recommendations?
I think they would. We've seen quite a few, and they are listed on the, because if you actually got credit, whether it was a military course or not, we see those on applications all the time. So I would say you do need to put that in.
Great. Okay. Yeah. Thank you. Okay. So they do have a helpful video about transcript entry. And again, especially when you're thinking about transcript entry in VMCAS, VMCAS is the expert, right? So contact them, read through their help. On most things, there is some sort of help, listed, whether it's a video or an article and things like that. So definitely look through that. So program materials, that will, sorry, for clarification, we need to send in transcripts from our school and enter it manually on the website. Yep. Program materials, you'll find all of programs is the same thing as saying veterinary schools. So what veterinary school programs are you applying to? So for Iowa State, if you'll have them listed all there. You'll click on Iowa State, you'll see kind of a little bit about our college there. The question about diversity and a few that like the MBA question and stuff like that is under our questions tab. So you'll find those there. You will also then match your prerequisites. So this is where you would match, organic chemistry 1, the organic chemistry 1 class you took with the prerequisite that we are looking for. So you'll see here, you can say, okay, I'm matching, or I'm selecting for that organic chemistry requirement. I'm going to have a list of classes that I can choose from here, and I'm going to select the one that best applies. Select the one that best applies. Kathy and her team will verify that to make sure. Now, again, please don't just willy-nilly, go through and select any course for any prerequisite. But know that if there is something that is off there, Kathy and her team are going to go through and say, okay, yes, this is, this chemistry 117 works for this prerequisite. Okay, let's talk a little bit about our supplemental application. And then I do see Dr. Sick's question here. I'm not forgetting about you. I promise that I will answer that, Dr. Sick, because it's a good one. So supplemental application, things that are new this year, or well, not new this year, but things to kind of keep in mind is that in years past, VMCAS has had a question about felonies or academic infractions. Those are now on our supplemental application page. You probably won't see those on VMCAS at all. And those are being moved to individual schools' supplemental applications if they have those. Also, if you accidentally hit submit on your application, we can unsubmit. Oh, on your supplemental application, we can unsubmit that. You'll have to talk to VMCAS if you accidentally submit that, although that one is, I think, a little bit harder to submit because you also pay the big VMCAS fee when you're submitting that VMCAS. So if you go to Iowa State, vetmed.iastate.edu, you click on future students, click on apply, you'll see a supplemental application link. We have this year, or the cycle that you would be applying for here. We also have the supplemental application open for those folks who still are utilizing some of the features in our supplemental application for the class that we're currently, filling or have maybe filled at the moment, Kathy.
We've got one position open right now.
There you go. This would be, if you're applying this year, this would be the link for you, or the button that you would want to push. You'll create a new account, even if you are reapplying. It's a new supplemental application. So, you'll create an account, even if you had an account last year or the year before. So you'll fill out all of that information. You don't have to submit VMCAS before you submit this supplemental application, but you do need to start VMCAS so that you get that VMCAS ID so that we can connect those two files, your supplemental and your VMCAS. When accessing the supplemental application, it asks for our residency listed on VMCAS. I'm currently changing from Montana to Iowa. I've been living in Iowa for the past 8 months. Welcome. Not as a student. Should I list it as Iowa or should I put it as Montana since I've not changed residency? Kathy, do you want to answer that one?
Okay. You can list it as Iowa, just to be aware that if you don't file with the university, your residency information and stuff, you will be charged non-resident tuition and everything if you were admitted. So I accept them because we want to know who is going to come in as an Iowa resident. So we accept them that way. If you're admitted, though, it goes through the university and the university makes that decision. Generally, you will have to complete a residency form in order for the university to say, yes, you are a resident.
Yep. Okay. Thank you. That's a good distinction. So you'll also kind of accept our terms of use. Now, I know that in this day and age, we get really, really good at being like, yes, I accept the terms of use. And we don't generally read through them. These are ones that you will want to read through because they're essentially the expectations that we have of you as an applicant to our college. So you can see there that you're going to check your message board and your status page. We'll talk about that in just a second. It talks about how it's your responsibility to, make sure that you get all of the information in, that you understand about the fee, citizenship, all of that. Okay. So please, please, please read through that. There's a way to access that. I'll show you in the next page if you want to review those. Yeah, so please read through those. That is essentially your the expectations that we have is for you as an applicant. So then you will have, once you've, started that supplemental application, it will generate an application or applicant status page for you. This is where it's going to give you all of the information that you need through the application process. So a while after you've, submitted your application, VMCAS has verified it. We update this manually. So it may take a little while. It's not going to be you hit submit on VMCAS and this is absolutely going to, change, or this is going to change within 30 seconds to say received. Our staff is looking through the applications that are marked as received and then updating the status page. So it is not automatic. This messaging system here, that is where you can, if you have questions about the application process at all, that is where you should communicate that, because it's going to keep your conversation in the same spot instead of saying, oh, well, I sent an email a month ago and now I've got another question, so I'm going to send another email. It's keeping it all within the same message thread. It's also where Kathy and her team will communicate with you. Any deadlines, expectations, questions about your application, all of that, prerequisites, all of that are going to live. So the messaging system is the #1 best way to communicate effectively with our admissions folks. Sometimes you will send an email to Kathy or to me, and my response maybe, and Kathy's response may be, great question, put it on the message board.
Yeah.
That's not to say like, oh, I'm not going to answer this question or whatever, but it's something that, hey, we want to make sure that both of us can go back and reference in a organized way. So we want it on the message board so that we can kind of have that thread. In general, if you send an email asking about your application, you will get a response that says, thanks so much for your question. Please post that on the message board and we'll answer it. I know for Kathy and her team, much of the time, especially when we're in kind of the highest, traffic season of the, or highest traffic time of the application season, that message board gets answered and gets managed before their inbox gets managed. So the message board is also sometimes the quickest way to get your question answered. If you have outstanding prerequisites, you'll see that here. The supplemental application, once that's been submitted, you'll see that here. Our GPAs, like Kathy was saying, we'll calculate those. Those are right there. And that's the place where if you see, oh, that's lower than I had calculated it on my own, if you kind of go through, or maybe it's a good thing and it's higher than you thought it was going to be, click that message board and say, hey, can you talk to me a little bit more about what classes, you used or how you calculated that GPA. The electronic signature page and your processing fee, those are both vitally important to making sure that those are green, that we've received that so we can move forward in the application process. Terms of use, you'll be able to see a copy of all of those things that you agreed to. This takes you to dates and deadlines for the application process. Those are very, very helpful too. So that is a little bit about your status page as well. COVID impacts, I think we've talked about most of these. But, please know that we do understand that we are, while I think things are getting back to quote unquote normal in a lot of places, the pandemic is still very, recent and somewhat ongoing. So impacts we want, we want you to know that we're taking those into considerations, especially the coursework, but also, experience, work, personal life, all of that kind of stuff. So that is, I think, wraps us up, but we do have some important questions in the chat. So we'll go ahead and do those really quickly. But I'll leave us with this, which is our email addresses. So if you do have questions, please feel free to give us a shout. Like we talked about in the beginning, Kathy works mostly with kind of applicants through the admissions process. I work with pre-veterinary students as they're entering the admissions process. However, if you send me an email that's better answered by Kathy or vice versa, we'll get your email where you need to go. With the caveat that once you've opened up that supplemental application, put it on the message board, right, Kathy?
That is absolutely correct.
So let's go to some questions. Dr. Sick asks, we have a student, a resident, so a student from Iowa who applied last cycle, and is an alternate. Should the student reapply, and will they need to go through the VMCAS process? Yes. So if a student has an unsuccessful application cycle, or if they're right now, an alternate on the alternate list, at this point in June, I would advise that student to, start working on maybe taking steps to applying next year. So they can open up VMCAS and they can actually have VMCAS copy all of their information into that, next cycle's application. So all they have to do is kind of update things, maybe tweak letters of recommendation and things like that. But also, I would encourage them to get a hold of us and do an application or an applicant review, so that we can give feedback and we can, kind of help them make sure that they're, maybe improving their application if they can. So I think next steps would be, yes, open up a new Vim, or not a new, but open up that VMCAS application again, copy all of the information, or have VMCAS copy all of the information into the new cycle, and then get a hold of us so that we can coordinate kind of an application review. So are there a certain number of spots for residents versus non-residents, or are all spots open to everyone who applies? So we are a public university. We reserve 60 seats for students from the state of Iowa. We have contracts with North Dakota, or agreements, I should say, with North Dakota and Nebraska that take up about 30 seats, 26 for Nebraska, 4 for North Dakota. And then 70 seats are kind of at-large seats. So students from anywhere else on the globe besides Iowa, North Dakota, and Nebraska. There's more information about that on our website. And there, if you want to send me an email, I would be happy to kind of set up a time where we could chat through some more kind of programmatic or admissions questions like that. So are there certain number? Oh, nope. I just can't ask that question. Usually when would applicants hear back regarding acceptance? February 15th. February 15th, towards the end of the day. That's our decision day. That's our decision or acceptance day. So you would know that day if you have been offered admission, you've been invited to our alternate list, or your application has been declined. February 15th. Do we need to submit our supplemental application before being able to see the application status page? No, but you just have to create an account. So that first page that I showed that had a bunch of demographic information, you do have to create that account. But then your supplemental application will have some different questions on it, like the academic infractions, felony charges, those sorts of things. So great question. I'm getting married at the end of July and we'll have a change in the name and in last name. For the application, can I keep my maiden name? Then if admitted, deal with name changes. Kathy?
Yes, just remember, if you change it like say we admit you and then you accept under your married name, we won't know who you are unless you tell us. So that is, I mean, we would prefer you keep your name the same through the entire application process and then let us know. But like I say, when people have accepted, we have had people accept and use their married name and we have no clue who these people are because they don't match up with anybody. So just make sure you give us both names if you're accepting.
Yep, perfect. Since I don't plan to apply until 2023 cycle, do I wait to start VMCAS application until September or until summer of 2023, or do I start now? Also, is submitting your application in June better than submitting your application in September? So great questions. VMCAS will roll over, just like if you have an unsuccessful application cycle, you can roll over that, application that you turned in. You can actually roll over incomplete applications too. So you could open it up now, work on it for a while. If you're not ready to submit this fall, you let that application deadline close by. VMCAS closes down for a while to do like website, maintenance and improvements and all of that. And then it'll open up in January of 2023, and you will be able to pick up where you left off and keep going on that application. So, I mean, if you are thinking about it this year, if you've got time this summer, putting in transcripts you don't have to send in your transcripts. In fact, I would say don't send in your transcripts, but you can enter your coursework, you can enter experiences, awards and honors, those sorts of things that are maybe more tedious, than essays and letters of recommendation and stuff. Save that for next year. But yeah, enter in as much information as you want this year. Absolutely. And you just let that deadline roll by. So do we use rolling admissions? No, we will wait till that deadline, wait until we have all of those applications, pretty much verified. And we will let everybody know on February 15th. So no rolling admissions process for us. The deadline for veterinary school applications for both the VMCAS and our supplemental application is September 15th at 11:59 p.m. Eastern time, which actually is 10:59 Central time. So just kind of keep that in mind. I will say, and I know that I think there was a question about like, is it better to, that's what I didn't answer, is that second part of that question. Is it better to submit in June than September? Not necessarily. However, it is also not preferred to submit your application on September 15th at 9:59 or whatever, things happen that day, the website crashes, your computer, doesn't work, your internet goes out, whatever it is. We also can't then help if you have, last minute questions. So, or if something goes wrong kind of in the last minute. So I would say there is a benefit to hitting submit somewhere between August 15th and September 1st, because then if something happens or you forget something or whatever, you've got a couple of weeks to kind of work that out before the deadline. After September 15th, we can't do anything. Essentially, we at that point, we see complete applications and incomplete applications. So I don't think June is necessary. If you have it done and you want to hit submit, great. But I would say 2 to 4 weeks early might not be a bad thing. So that's the procrastinator in me talking though. So if I set myself an August 15th deadline, then it'll be in by September 1st. So after the 60 in-state seats are filled, will the remainder of the in-state students go into the 70 out-of-state students? So I think the question there is, so
everybody's kept in their own applicant pool. So if we have if we've admitted 60 and 60 have for Iowa and 60 of them have accepted, the ones on the alternate list, just they wait there. If somebody declines, then we start down the Iowa alternate list. The same goes for North Dakota. Nebraska has their own system now, but it's the same thing. The Nebraskans all stay together, and then all the non-resident non-contracts all stay together.
Yep. Yes, great. Thank you, Kathy. Okay, those are all the questions that we have. We did it in 3 hours. Thank you so much for all of you who asked questions today, who attended today. I appreciate all of you learning a little bit more about our system. We do have another question. That's totally fine. Will you lose your spot if you do not accept right away? So if you are admitted on February 15th, kind of in that initial round of, of admissions or invitations that go out, you have until April 15th to let us know if you are accepting that position and pay your deposit. You will not lose your spot if you wait until April 15th to do that. You have some time. What we know is that I won't say probably, but you may be collecting different offers of admission and different information about the applications that you submitted. We want you to make the best decision about your veterinary school career. So you have time. When you are called off the alternate list, you will get some information about deadlines at that time. If you're called off in March, you'll still probably you still will get till that April 15th deadline. If you're called in either very close to that April 15th decision day or after, our admissions team will give you a deadline. Typically it's 10 days.
7 to 10 days right away. And it does get shorter as we get closer to when classes start.
Yep.
Because we can't give people a long time to make the decision at that point.
Okay, perfect. So our interviews part of our application process? No, they are not. You don't have to worry about interviewing for Iowa State. Do Casper scores get uploaded to VMCAS or get sent directly to the schools? You do not have to upload that to VMCAS. We have access to that. So you don't have to worry about like GRE.
It gets sent to the schools.
It gets sent to the schools. Yes. So you don't GRE. I know you have to update or, send your scores to the schools. We communicate directly with Altus, which is the company that oversees Casper. So you don't have to do anything about that. So great. And thank you all. Thank you all. Okay. So we are just at noon, so we will bid adieu. Although if you are furiously typing a question, I think Kathy and I will maybe hang out for another minute or two. But thank you all. Enjoy the rest of your Saturday. I hope it's as beautiful where you are as it is going to be in Iowa today. The sun is shining and it's great. So thank you all very much.
Thank you.